Welcome my creative friends. My name is Sunshine and today we're looking at one of the most well-known, most popular pencils for artists everywhere. These pencils are highly regarded for their very saturated look and feel, with an almost cult following online and a reputation for excellence. One of the most famous American pencils around, originally from New York, but now made in Mexico. Please say hello to the Prismacolor Premier Colored Pencils. The Prismacolor Premier Softcore, as they are now known, are one of the most popular artist grade pencils here in Australia and, from what I've been told, around the world. They have a real reputation for saturation and vibrancy, and the people who use them often love them, and they're never shy to tell you that they do. Even I've been guilty of reaching for our Prismacolors if I feel like I need a more saturated, vibrant blend. But are they actually everything people assume? Do they live up to this hype? Are they as great as people think? Let's go find out. What we have here today is a 72 pencil tin of the Prismacolor Premiers. The tin itself immediately pops with such super vibrant colouring, and unusually for a pencil box of this size, it's square. The Prismacolor branding is fairly prominent on the cover, with newer branding for the Prismacolor stating they are softcore pencils. This is a new thing for the Premiers, as only a few months ago they were simply known as Premier. I'm curious why they've renamed themselves. It could be they just wanted to specify that these pencils are soft, or maybe they are planning to release a harder pencil at a later date. Future YouTube, let us know. Back to the pencils. If I'm careful and turn the box over, on the rear of the box is a majority of the information for the pencils, including a vibrant colour swatch and information pertaining to the environmental certification. We love a good swatch, particularly one this poppy, so it's a nice professional touch and the information here is fairly concise. Once we open the tin, we can see the pencils sitting in an inner plastic divider. The pencils seem bright and simple at first glance, although I noticed straight away that the divider isn't touching the edges of the tin and kind of slides around the tin, which is a bit unusual. However, the pencils don't seem to move around inside the plastic itself when you remove some, which is good. The pencils in this kit are split across 3 trays, which when they are pulled out feel thin and a bit cheap. We'll have to be careful using this kit that they don't flex to a point where we drop the pencils. Interestingly as well, this is the first kit I've seen where the pencils don't come sorted by colour. Each tray has variations of colours, but the colours aren't grouped together. Also, it looks like we have a split pencil here in the beige. We're going to talk about split pencils a little bit later because I don't want you to prejudge. Finding a damaged pencil in any brand new set of pencils really isn't what we want, but it is only one pencil. The Prismacolor's website is a very easy site to get around, and it's very easy to drill down to the pencils we have here, which are, of course, the Premiers, now branded as Premier Softcore Coloured Pencils. These pencils are available in tins and cardboard boxes, singularly and in lots of 12, 24, 36, 48, 72, 132 and 150 count. What's really even more interesting here is that they have a number of very specific palettes available for these pencils, including a 23 pencil manga set, a 12 pencil under the sea botanical and landscape set, as well as a 24 pencil portrait set and highlighting and shading set. Lots of sets for lots of purposes, which is fantastic. Each set has quite a bit of information about the pencils, including very nice glossy photos, a decent swatch set, and a review section for each set. Great if you want to know what others think. Looking at the pencil itself, these pencils are a classic, simple coloured pencil design. They are a sleek and smooth, round-barreled pencil, which is quite comfortable to hold. These pencils have a surprisingly long length, with the overall pencil being 180mm from tip to tail, and the diameter is a slim 7.5mm. The Prismacolor have a wax core, which fits the diameter of this pencil well at 3.8mm. Interestingly, these pencils come with a blunt point, so you have more pencil for the buck, I suppose, but you need to sharpen them before use. If we have a look at the shaft of the pencil, the information in silver, slightly indented font sits fully on one side of it. From the tip, we have the Prismacolor logo, followed by the pencil range being Premier and the name of the colour in English and French, separated by a tiny triangle. Finally, on the end, there is a colour reference number indented on a small silver plate. The end of the pencil is just a 90-degree cutoff and not rounded, so very simple. The Prismacolor Premier pencils have a very classic design. There's something about them that says they have a purpose, and that's the purpose they're going to achieve. There isn't a great deal of excess in this design, as I'm assuming Prismacolor sees the market for these pencils as people who want to use them rather than collect them. For me, I have to say these pencils aren't really my favourite in designs compared to the pencils we've reviewed so far. They're a bit too basic for my taste, and I'm not a huge fan of the open 90-degree end. I do, however, appreciate the pencils are minimalistic in design and that they have the pencil's colour over the whole of the shaft, as I like to be able to see what I'm getting. To me, they feel quite light to hold, but I'm used to a much heavier pencil. So far, they also seem quite comfortable to hold. So that's the physical side of our Prismacolor pencils. Next, we're going to do some tests to see how good these pencils really are. As always, some of these tests are scientific-ish, while others not so much, and instead rely more on my personal opinion or the vibe these pencils give. Firstly, let's have a look at the saturation and vibrancy test. Okay, so the saturation and vibrancy test. How bright and saturated can we make these pencils? As well as showing the vibrancy, this test is going to show us a few things. How hard the lead is, how much pigment they put down, and how consistent they are over a pressure range. On a good pencil, we can expect to have obvious steps towards a more vibrant saturation as our pressure becomes heavier and heavier. This test will be where the Prismacolors should shine, as they are well known for being super soft pencils, and so I'm expecting a lot of colour here. Let's go see what happens. Now, because there are just too many pencils to test in all these packs, I'm going to pick 4 colours from each kit in a red, green, blue and yellow, and of course the black and white. We'll run these tests on each of these and then assess the results. The colours I've chosen for this test are red, PC924, green, PC912, blue, PC903, yellow, PC916, black, PC935, and white, PC938. To start this test today, we're going to be laying down our pencils at 5 different pressures: 25 gram, 50 gram, 100 gram, 200 gram, and 400 grams. We're going from a very light to a very heavy. And then we're going to be comparing the results. In a good pencil, we can expect to see obvious step-ups in saturation and vibrancy as our weights step up. Of course, I am just using my kitchen scales for today's test, and no, they are not from a lab, so the measurements might move around a bit. Also, for those paper people out there, I'm just using a basic 120 GSM mixed media white paper for these tests. Let's get this party started. To our saturation and vibrancy test is going to at least tell us how saturated and vibrant these pencils are. To start us off, we're popping down the red pencil at the 25 gram mark. Now keep in mind here that the 25 grams is not a lot of weight. However, the red here is actually really saturated and vibrant at this weight, which is good, but it might mean that they don't blend so well because we haven't got that lighter end of the spectrum. Green is similarly saturated and vibrant here at the 25 grams, and the blue seems to be coming down just the same. 25 grams is very saturated and vibrant. Now, yellow can be tricky because it is quite a light pigment, and it's about the same here, so yellow is quite difficult to see at the 25 gram weight. And the black is similar to the red, green, and blue with that saturation and vibrancy at the 25 grams. Moving into the 50 grams now. Starting off with our trusty red pencil, we're going to be drawing down at 50 grams of weight. There is an increase in the saturation and vibrancy in this red from the 25 grams to the 50 grams. I wouldn't say it's 100% of an increase, but it's an increase nevertheless. The green is very similar. We've had a nice little increase there in the saturation and vibrancy. However, it's not 100% of an increase. Our blue is again very similar, so red, green and blue seem pretty consistent so far with that increase in saturation and vibrancy here. The yellow has gone up a teeny tiny bit. It hasn't gone up a huge amount, to be perfectly honest, from the 25 gram to the 50 grams, but that black is very similar to the red, green and blue. We've got a nice increase in saturation and vibrancy. Moving into the 100 grams now. 100 grams is often where our pencils shine because it's a good amount of pressure to get a nice saturation and vibrancy. And this is definitely the case for the red pencil. We've gone up in saturation and vibrancy on our red, and it looks like we're coming in with a good amount of saturation and vibrancy increase in our green as well. Let's try out our True Blue Blue, everyone. And yes, that is absolutely more saturated and vibrant from the 50 gram to the 100 grams. Not 100% of an increase, but it's still an increase nevertheless. And our yellow is actually starting to come to play. We can see it properly here in the 100 grams, which is great. For our black, we have another increase in our black saturation and vibrancy in the 100 gram from the 50 grams. So far, the black has been relatively consistent throughout this test. With the 200 grams, will we continue to see such a consistent increase? At the 200 grams, I am expecting a super saturated and super vibrant pencil. And well, this red is delivering just that. So we're getting a bit more of a saturated and vibrant red here in the 200 grams from the 100 grams. Will the green be similar? Yes, it is very similar. The red, green, blue, and black have all been pretty similar this whole way along, which is wonderful. Now for our blue. And yes, that blue is much more saturated and vibrant from the 100 gram to the 200 grams, which is great to see and exactly what we want. How is our yellow going to go? He struggled a little way along here with our saturation and vibrancy test, but I think it's finally starting to come into itself now. So we've got a much more saturated and vibrant yellow. And for our black, who has been relatively consistent this whole test, but he has gone up a little bit in saturation and vibrancy from the 100 grams to the 200 grams. Now the really exciting one, the 400 grams. So this is where we're going to see our pencils at pressure. This is the hardest that we're going to go in this test, and this is going to tell us just how saturated and vibrant these pencils are. And that red is so vibrant here in this 400 gram mark. Though I was kind of expecting these pencils to be a little bit more saturated at this point. However, they are giving us all the saturation vibes. You look at that green compared to the 200 grams, it's definitely gone up at least 100% in the saturation and vibrancy. In fact, I feel like the red, green, blue, and yellow have all nearly doubled in saturation and vibrancy in this 400 grams. Now for our black. Similarly, it is a nice, strong, saturated black here at the 400 grams. Let's have a little look at how our white goes. I'm super excited to try the white because I've been told that the Prismacolor white is really bright and saturated. So let's see if that's true. Starting at the 25 grams now, we have a very strong saturation and vibrancy at the 25 gram weight. Moving into the 50 gram weight, that's so similar to the 25 grams. It looks nearly exactly the same. With the 100 grams, have we got much of a difference there? At least that saturation has gone up a little bit. Hopefully the 200 gram, yes, that's giving us much more of a saturation there, which is awesome. Now let's see what the 400 grams does. Wow, that's quite a step. That's quite a jump even, I would say. That's probably the brightest white that we've seen so far in these tests. So that was the saturation and vibrancy test. And interestingly, these pencils are largely consistent, which is excellent. But I'm not sure if they are as vibrant as I was expecting. The red, green, blue, and black are relatively consistent with constant stepping in saturation as the pressure went up. But if we look at the yellow, it doesn't actually feel like it went up in pressure at all from the 25 gram to the 50 gram. They look nearly the same. And the 100 to the 200 gram really don't have a huge amount of difference. Overall, the lightest weights being the 25 gram has a high level of saturation, although the yellow is not as bright as I'd like. And at the 400 gram, while they are saturated and dense, even though the color does build up nicely to this weight, I think I was expecting just a fraction more vibrance. Maybe it's just the pencils I've chosen, I don't know. Anyway, talking about disappointment, that white definitely hasn't disappointed. It has to be one of the whitest whites I've ever seen from a colored pencil. It's just very thick and intense when you lay it down. It's really amazing, and I'd have to say it's one of the strongest whites we've tested. One thing I did notice while I was using these pencils is that there is so much residue coming off them when I use them. I feel like my hands got multicolored dandruff. I think that's likely due to the pencils being a softer wax. Something else I noticed is that I also really struggled to keep these pencils at a singular pressure. The pencil kept jumping around. That's why the swatches are a bit all over the place, which was weird. I've never had that with a pencil before. Okay, it's time to grade these pencils. So looking at the scale of A to F, with S being superb, if we average our 6 pencils together, For the saturation and vibrancy test, I'm giving the Prismacolor pencils an excellent A-. And that puts our Prismacolors right here. A great start for the Prismacolors. Alrighty, the next test for us is the single pencil gradient. Here we are taking each colored pencil and making a gradient with it. We want to make as smooth a gradient as we possibly can. I want to go from as intense as possible to as light as possible. What I want to know is how consistent can we make these gradients? Will it remain smooth as I pull off my pressure? Let's find out, shall we? It's time to create some gradients, my friends, and gradients are great. It's a really good exercise of working from a really intense pressure to a really light one and seeing what happens to the pencil in between. So we're going to see what happens with our red pencil first, and I actually think that's a relatively decent gradient. It's nice and smooth. Whereas the green, we're starting off really intense and we're slowly taking off the pressure. I feel like it's not as nice as it could be. Something else I noticed while I was creating these gradients is that the pencil moved around a lot. I don't know if that's just a consistency thing or I wasn't pushing hard enough on the paper. It's just as I was pulling off that weight, I found that the pencil moved a lot. That blue gradient isn't as smooth as it could be. There is a little bit of a step off there from the heavy weight into the medium weight, and similarly in that yellow, though the yellow is not too bad. Let's see how our black gradient goes. Okay, so starting off super heavy and slowly but surely we're releasing the pressure. There is a little bit of a step from the heavy pressure to the medium, but it's not too bad. I am noticing though with all of these gradients that we've really found it difficult to achieve the lighter end of the spectrum. So around the 25 gram mark is really hard to see here. Doing a white gradient now just to see how this brilliant white performs. So we're starting off really intensely and slowly but surely releasing that pressure. Obviously at the heavy pressure, this white is magnificent, but again, it does lack that lighter end of the pressure scale here. Okay, so our Prismacolor gradients are done and the overall results were pretty good. I struggled a little bit with the Prismacolor in keeping this smooth transition over the entire gradient. Similarly to the bouncing around I had in the saturation test, I had the same sensation here too. I just found overall it was difficult to control them. As I got lighter with the pressure, they just didn't seem to get any lighter with me. I don't feel like they captured the light weights at all. That said, the red was excellent and the other colours were fairly good, although they did have steppings from the high pressures to the mid pressures and again lacked what I would expect in the lighter end. The white is again super vibrant, but like most of the colours has that step from the high to mid range. With this test, I also noticed that these pencils aren't super comfortable to use. Perhaps I'm having to compensate for the unusual movement as I draw. Either way, I'm finding them hard to draw with and my hand is getting a bit sore. It's interesting because usually round barrel pencils are my go-to. And normally I find them very comfortable. All right, let's grade our pencils by averaging our 6 pencils together and taking the control issue into consideration. I'm going to give Prismacolor pencils a score of B+ in gradients. Looking at the graph, I probably should have been harder on these pencils because B seems to be the score most pencils receive. It's time for the blending test. For this test, I'm taking our 4 primary colours, red to green, blue to yellow, and I'm going to blend them as best I can. We're going to be looking closely at what happens at the point where the colours meet. What I'm looking for here is a seamless blend of the 2 colours and if they will mix well together. So, will the Prismacolors manage to blend well together? Let's go check it out. Let's blend some pencils together. I'm going to start off with my bright shiny red pencil here and I'm going to create basically a gradient. I'm going as hard as I can to as soft as I can, as smoothly as possible. So far the gradient has been relatively easy to create with not much stepping in this red pencil. Let's see what happens with our green pencil now. Basically we're going to be doing exactly the same thing but bringing it from the bottom to meet the red. And as we go up, I've started off really intensely and I'm starting to pull off that pressure. And straight away we've seen that there is a mixing and a blending in the middle here. It's almost like a purpley brown color. I would say it's one of the smoothest blends that we've made here though, and those colors really are changing as they mix together. The blue Prismacolor pencils are going down well. There is a little bit of stepping from the really heavy pressure into the medium pressure here, but it's not too bad. Realistically, these gradients are rather nice, and I am trying my very hardest to get a really nice light weight at the end here, but these pencils aren't really having any of the light weights at all. Let's try with our yellow and bringing that up, starting off super saturated. Oh my goodness, as soon as that yellow gets put into the blue, we're seeing a beautiful green coming from it. These pencils are really blending very well together rather than sitting on top of each other. They're coming together to create something totally new, which is great. The results are in and the Prismacolor Premier pencils blend extremely well. They're not perfect, but they do a very good job. The first thing you'll notice is how well these colors mix. As soon as that yellow hit the blue, we get a vibrant dominant green, and the red and green have given a decent browny purple. There is some small stepping, but not a huge amount. It's pretty much exactly what we saw in the gradient test. And I'm surprised that even the light ends of the gradient got quite a decent mix. I think this is due to the fact that the Prismacolor's light end is still fairly saturated and dense. We saw this in the saturation test. There really is no super light end with these pencils, and it's really helped the result here in this particular test. Because there is no super light weights, it's basically blended across the whole gradient. The mixing here is a characteristic of wax-based pencils. While oil blends by multiple semi-opaque layers, layering wax tends to blend by mixing the pigment together. I think the Prismacolor has so far given us the best example of wax blending. The lack of the light end here is a little limiting for this pencil. The Prismacolor really struggles at low weights, and for anything subtle, I think this could be an issue. You may also have noticed how much of the pencil I actually used doing this test. I usually do each test a couple of times to check my results, but these pencils burnt through the core very quickly. They also tended to pile up the residue from those cores on the paper. Okay, let's grade the Prismacolor pencils for blending. It is one of the best blend of colors I've seen on these tests, but it does lack a low end, which is a big issue with this pencil. For that reason, they are getting an A+. I honestly would have considered a superb with these pencils if they had more of a noticeable light end and weren't so messy. And that puts the Prismacolor right at the top. For our next test, we're going to check out the white pencil in the white factor. This test is going to be really interesting with these pencils because the white so far has been one of the most vibrant whites we've seen. What I'm doing here is bringing back our gradient test we prepared earlier, and I'm going to use this as a base for our white to draw over as hard as I can to see what happens. We want to see if and how the white pencil affects the already drawn colors. Let's go find out. I think the white factor on this pencil is going to be really interesting because it is such a white and vivid pencil. If we have a little look at where I'm pushing as hard as I can over this right hand side of this blend, you can see that it's almost lightening it, almost making it a pastel-y color. And if we have a look at between the red and the green, it's almost blending them together. One other thing I am also noticing is there's a lot of residue coming off that pencil. Let's try the blue side now. Will we have such a marked effect on these colors? Here we go. As I'm pushing as hard as I can on this right hand side of the blue and yellow blend, we can see that it is lightening and pastelling that blue especially, and a little bit in the yellow there, and it is helping them again mix really well together. Okay, it's official. The Prismacolor white is the most vibrant I've seen so far, and it hasn't disappointed in the white test. Overall, it's a pretty awesome pencil. It's so bright and vivid. What it's done is it's really added to the colors that have already been drawn. It enhanced the blend and almost made them a pastel color. The Prismacolor white adds a whole different dimension and versatility to these pencils, which is fantastic. However, this might actually be a problem for those of you who use the white as a burnishing tool. Because it is so vibrant, it becomes the dominant color, and if you use a white as a burnisher, while it will actually burnish, it will significantly affect the colors beneath. Again, that's part of the fun of this test. How you use the white is how you'll see the results. I'm going to give Prismacolors a big fat A for the white factor test. And that clearly puts the Prismacolor white right at the top of our test results. Our next test is the color accuracy test. I want to see if the barrel of the Prismacolor pencils is the same color as the pigment they put down when drawing. This test is important because we as an artist need to know that the colors we choose are actually the colors we get when drawing. Let's find out whether the Prismacolor pencils are accurate to their design color. I have a funny feeling that this test is going to be a little bit different for the Prismacolors. I've had a suspicion all the way along that the barrel doesn't match the pigment. And we can see straight away with our red here, the barrel is a lot darker than the red pigment put down. Similar with the green, the barrel's a lot darker than the green that's been put down. And the blue especially is at least 3 shades darker than the blue that's been put down in the pigment. The yellow's not so bad, but the black, the barrel of the black pencil is a lot darker than the pigment that it's put down. Okay, so this is weird. For some reason, the Prismacolor pencils are consistently much darker on the barrel than they actually are in the pigment. I mean, it's an okay color, but the core of the pencil puts down is a pigment that is so much more brighter than advertised. It's a strange thing when a pencil manufacturer undersells itself like this. Usually, it's the other way around, but no, the Prismacolor's barrel accuracy is well off. In color accuracy, using our scale, I'm giving the Prismacolor a B-. On our graph, that puts the Prismacolor here. It's that time for my favorite test, the break factor. This is the test where we break all the pencils for no reason at all. No, not really. As fun as that would be, pencils are precious. This is a test where we measure the pressure it takes to snap the core of the pencils. This test measures the break point of the core and how consistent that breaks are through our test pencils. Consistent breaks mean consistency in the manufacturing, and our overall average break point gives us an idea of how hard these pencils are. Just how much pressure before the Prismacolors break? Let's go find out. To make this test as consistent as possible across all the pencils we're going to review, I've set up a couple of controls. I'm going to sharpen each pencil to a point. I'm then going to dull them slightly by drawing 3 lines at pressure. Basically, this will make sure we don't have a super fine point that will break immediately. I'm then going to be using a 45-degree square to get a consistent angle of pressure. Makes sense? Let's go break some leads. I can't wait to see what happens with these pencils. I've always assumed that they're super soft because they seem super soft when you draw with them, but it's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens. Here we are setting up the red now, and we're putting on the pressure. Slowly but surely, we're building up, and 814 grams. That's actually a lot higher than I thought it was going to be. Perhaps these pencils are a lot stronger than I thought they were. Let's see what happens with our green now. Setting it up with our 45-degree angle, and here we go. Slowly we're putting on the pressure now. Is it going to reach the same amount? Here we go. 711 is where that broke. Okay, so it's a little bit less than the red pencil was, which was interesting. It's about 100 grams less. Will it be the same story with the blue? We've just dashed off our tips and we're setting up the pencil. Here we go. Putting on the pressure. It's building and up we go, and 633 grams. Okay, again, we're going down in the break point, which is really interesting. So red was the highest, then we've got green, then we've got blue. Is the yellow going to be the same? Will it follow that same trend? Here we go, putting on the pressure. 726. Okay, so that's closer to the green. Wow, that pencil actually really crumbled there. We've lost quite a lot of that yellow pencil. Now for our black, sometimes the black pencils can be really tough and sometimes they're not. Is this going to be a really strong one? Here we go, building up that pressure. 619, okay. So that's not actually a terribly strong black at all. Let's see how it goes with the white. I assume the white is going to be really soft because it's so saturated and vibrant. Here we go, up we go in the pressure, and there we go, 819 grams. Okay, that was pretty exciting. Man, I love this test. Firstly, interestingly, these pencils crumbled rather than snapped. They're the first ones to do that, and I also feel like we lost more core just doing the tip dash off before we did the actual test of these pencils. It's actually something I've noticed when drawing with them and haven't really been able to explain. It feels like the core smears down on the paper rather than drawing, and that may explain the crumbling tip. One of the things we've never really considered in these tests is that there may actually be different characteristics in how a pencil breaks based upon the core mix, rather than just when they break. But I guess that's another test for another time. If we have a look at the Prismacolor's average breakpoint, we have a result of 720 grams. This is surprising, as I'd assumed they would be softer. 720 grams is 1 gram harder than the Polychromos. This is bizarre, as I'd always considered the Polychromos to be a much harder pencil, but the numbers don't lie. The consistency of the breakpoint is all over the place, with a result of a high of 819 grams in the white to a low of 633 in the blue. Hey everyone, it is Sunshine from the future here. I just realized while I was editing this that the lowest breakpoint isn't actually the blue, it's the black at 619 grams. That's all I wanted to say. Back to your regular scheduled programming. That's pretty poor and not really indicative of consistency with these pencils. The white did surprise me with its high breakpoint due to how vibrant it's been through testing. The Prismacolors seem to be full of surprises. Keeping that lack of consistency and the strange crumbling in mind, for our break test, I'm giving the Prismacolor Premier a solid B. Putting them right here on our scale. For my last test, I want to know if these pencils spark joy or if they cause despair. This test is purely based upon my personal opinion and the vibe I get from the Prismacolor pencils. Firstly, let's talk about the look of these pencils. They are a classic round barrel pencil. I don't actually feel particularly strongly about them one way or the other. They're not super cool, neither are they ugly. To me, they look meh. They feel a little thin in my hand, and to be honest, they have caused a little issue with hand fatigue. I was and am really disappointed in how they arrived. The cracked pencil in this kit wasn't ideal. I probably should also share that there's more to this than you've seen. This is actually the second kit I bought for this review. Originally, I was going to use this smaller kit for this review, and I did in fact use some of its pencils for several tests. But in this kit, there were multiple very badly split pencils, with the white particularly almost in half. So bad were they that I brought another larger kit to refilm this whole review. Asking around online, apparently Prismacolor has a reputation for broken and split pencils. Let me know in the comments if you've experienced this with Prismacolor. Shattered pencils are not a good look for any pencil brand, let alone one this expensive that markets itself as an artist pencil. Performance-wise, if we have a look at how they scored on the tests themselves, they've done pretty well overall. They are super saturated and vibrant, and while they may not have quite lived up to my expectations, they have done very well. Particularly in the blending, I was pleasantly surprised at how well they did. And that white pencil, that little guy is super bright and saturated. But the Prismacolor's saturation and vibrancy seems to be a double-edged sword. They have the vibrancy, but they really suffer at the lighter weights. I suspect subtlety is not something you'd aim for with these pencils. Even though they had a harder breakpoint, they perform like a soft pencil, and that means I think you'd really struggle with details. They feel like a very good colouring pencil rather than artist pencils. I don't think these Prismacolor tests have changed my mind in how and when I use these pencils. I currently use them for a pop of vibrancy in my work, but never for detail, and I think that's going to be unchanged. So, do the Prismacolor pencils spark joy? Even with the broken pencils, I'm going to say yes. Yes, they do spark joy, but only for their vibrancy and blending. So, the Prismacolor Premier pencils receive a B- from my joy today. On our graph, that puts the Prismacolor here. Let's get an overall score for the Prismacolor pencils. How I'm going to do that is by aggregating all the scores that Prismacolor pencils have received today and get the total score for these pencils. Drumroll. The Prismacolor Premier pencils overall mark is a B+. It's time to pop our Prismacolors on the big graph now, which is starting to look pretty good, and they fit around here. Well done, Prismacolor. So that's it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed checking out the Prismacolors today. I'm interested in hearing what you guys think of these pencils. As a very well-loved pencil, I'm sure you've all got a lot to say. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my findings, or you think I've missed anything in these pencils. Don't worry, we've got more reviews to do together, so I'll be back in 2 weeks' time with, you guessed it, that review on the blackest paints in the world. I know, it's coming. There's just some longer tests in this one and I keep running out of time. As always, if you want more stuff, have a look around and feel free to come hang out with us on Twitch. That's it, everyone. Have a great day.